What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Hot Takes with Holmes here on Radio Free Radford. My name is Blake Holmes, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Isaiah Addair. Stick around with us. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent action around football season and the end of Major League Baseball's regular season. First, as always here on Hot Takes with Holmes, let's start out with the National Football League. One of our favorite things to talk about, it seems like. And a little bit of surprise, maybe a surprise to some of us, maybe not to others. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday, they were 3-0. They looked, 2-1. They looked pretty good overall in their games. Even in the loss against Pittsburgh, they looked pretty good. And then they go to Chicago, and Chicago just absolutely blows them out of the water. I believe the final score was like 48-12, and I mean, just domination by both Chicago's defense and their offense. Mitch Trubisky actually putting a game together and really have a monster of a game. So, if you're Tampa Bay in this scenario and you've just suffered this huge loss to the Chicago Bears, do you take that and what do you take from this game? Do you take it as it's time to move away from Fitzpatrick and keep Jameis in the starting position? Do you maybe make a move or two because you still looked pretty good in the opening games? What direction do you take after this loss?
You answer me this, okay? You have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who had the best first three games of a season. Well, I'd say possibly the best first three games of a season in history. You have that, right? He comes in one game, performs bad in just one half, not even all game, only one half, and he underperforms, so you replace him. Okay, would that have lost other quarterbacks that have had similar starts to the season? Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Would you replace them after just one half? Given they have more of a better body of work, but no one has done what Fitzpatrick has done through three games. No one's done that before. And they give up on him after one half of play.
My viewpoint is, I think I agree with you. Fitzpatrick had a fantastic start to the season. I do want to say this. I definitely think that if you wanted to consider last week, let's go back to last week as a reference. Fitzpatrick still played a fantastic game in Tampa on Monday night. It was still a great game. Let's be keen to point out, though, he did, I believe, have 3 interceptions in that game. So it was still a little bit of he struggled at times against really a less than mediocre Pittsburgh defense. And he came into this game, I actually predicted Chicago to win this game at home. And, of course, no one expected 48-10 by any means by Chicago. I expected it to be a closer game, but Fitzpatrick went 9 of 18 for 126 yards and 1 pick, no touchdown passes. I agree with you in that, and here's the thing. Tampa Bay with Jameis, they have time. They don't need to try to get Jameis all the starting as many starting reps as he possibly can get right now. It helps. Don't get me wrong. I think James Winston's still a fantastic quarterback. He can be a great quarterback in the future. But I think that you ride with Fitzpatrick until it's certain that you are out of the playoff picture, because he was the one that led you out to 2-0 pretty convincingly as well. And the minute you start actually losing more games, you have a losing record, then you throw in Jameis and try to figure out maybe a thing or two, because they're not out of this. It's early season. No one's out of the playoff race yet. And I think the Buccaneers have time, so it's not ideal to go away from Fitzpatrick this early.
And not just that, I've heard people say Fitzpatrick has so many weapons. They have Deshaun Jackson, he's not lost any speed over the years. Mike Evans, who is a bigger version of Randy Moss with not as sure hands. He has weapons. But you also got to think, Winston had better weapons last year because he had those guys, plus he had Doug Martin in the backfield. And then you also have to look, the Bears have maybe the best defense in the NFL. They've made everyone look foolish. So, I mean, you got to look at both sides of it, not just how bad he maybe was, but how good the defense played.
Moving on to our next topic, a pretty hot topic yesterday. preseason this year, we saw a few holdouts. Only one of them really going into the regular season with Le'Veon Bell. But the example of the one yesterday was Earl Thomas sat out the preseason, sat out training camps. He wanted a contract extension. Seattle obviously saw it differently. They didn't agree to terms, and so Earl Thomas does what so many players do. They hold out, come back in week one, and yesterday gave Le'Veon Bell a little bit more of a reason to be more valid in what he's doing, in that he was trying to make a coverage play in the end zone, landed awkwardly, and he had to be carted off the field. But that's not what everyone's talking about. That's unfortunate. But what they're talking about is Earl Thomas was being carted off of the field. No one really knows who it was directed at, but you look over at Earl Thomas on the cart, and he's showing the bird in a general direction of the Seahawks bench. And so it's the idea is he flipping off a specific person? Is he flipping off the coach, the Seattle organization, and saying, if you had paid me, then this might have been prevented? But I mean, it's definitely a bad look, I think. I mean, it's funny from looking from the outside in, but when you look at it from an organizational standpoint, it's not a good look, especially when you're a player who's given so much time and heart to your team over the years, has turned on you by the snap of a finger. So, what does this mean for Seattle? Does Earl Thomas have a point here, or what do you think here?
I think it's like a football version of, how LeBron James this past year got into an argument with Danny Ainge and used some explicit language when talking to Ainge, just because the qualms he has with the organization. I think it's the football version of that. He's been a stand-up guy, giving everything to the city. Even went as far as saying, if you're not going to give me an extension, at least trade me so you can get something out of it, and I can go somewhere that I feel comfortable at, that I want to be. And I felt like he's not valued by the organization, but he feels like he's not valued enough to be put in that situation where he can choose where to go. So he kind of doesn't feel wanted, I think. And I think that it was probably directed toward the front office, like you said, just because of the disrespect, and it ended up costing him his leg.
I do have to wonder if Earl Thomas does this hurt his free agency stock? I mean, you have to consider this by a little bit. He's been hurt the past 2 years, and that does play a factor into it. But I still don't know if I agree with holding out until week 10, and like Le'Veon's doing, is a good thing, because at least Earl Thomas, when he came back to the regular season, you show that he still cares enough about the team and he cares about the game enough to come back and still try to contend for a full season. And protecting yourself from injuries, that's great. If you really think that you can get that big-time contract, that's great. You go ahead and do that. But Earl Thomas, in this case, knew that he was probably going to have to put together a certain performance to either convince Seattle to take him back or just make sure someone else can get him. And due to the unfortunate circumstances, I don't know if he's going to be able to get that contract at this point. But a little bit of an unfortunate situation coming out from Seattle yesterday, and speedy recovery to Earl Thomas. But yeah, it's really a bad look for the Seattle organization. Final topic before we get into our game predictions. One of the top teams in the AFC that people thought this year is currently tied for last in their division. The Pittsburgh Steelers are struggling. There's no other way to say it. With a record of 1-2-1, losing to Baltimore last night, which is not a bad loss. Baltimore is a very good team, but you expected better from this organization and this roster coming into the year. Even with Le'Veon Bell holding out, you still had a very capable running back in James Conner coming out of the backfield, and they just haven't lived up to expectations. So, in your mind, is it more so the defense's fault, because the defense has given up a lot of points, or is it more so the offense's fault in that they can't score in the second half?
I would say defensively, because you think, aside from yesterday, James Conner looked good. Like, he's looked good. He looked good through the first 3 weeks. And he's been playing a similar role as Le'Veon, so I don't think you can really put it on the offense, because Roethlisberger's been playing good. AB's been playing like AB. Juju's been playing very capable, as well as the tight end. So I don't think you can really put the blame on the offense. The defense is missing Ryan Shazier. We saw that toward the end of last year in playoffs, they're obviously hurting in the middle of the field. They need a leader on defense, and they don't have it. And the offense, I think, is pressing too much, trying to score in the first half. They're putting so much energy there, and in the second half, the defense can't get a stop, and you kind of put yourself in a hole where the offense tries too much and nothing happens.
One of the main identities of Pittsburgh's defense over the years has been getting to the quarterback, Blitzburgh. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine last night when I said there was literally a point, it was 3rd and 4. And it was a normal running situation for Baltimore. And what did Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator, do? He rushed 3 and set everybody else back in coverage. Your secondary is not good enough right now. They're getting torched left and right. Your secondary is not good enough to not send pressure ever. I understand in some situations if you constantly are sending pressure and you back off and you let them believe you're sending pressure, you only blitz 3. I understand that. But when you are giving, I don't care who it is. I still if you give a guy like Joe Flacco all the time to throw, Joe Flacco is one that he's either going to be a great quarterback or he's going to struggle. And there's really no in between to me. Yesterday was the former. So, really, in any quarterback in the National Football League, if you give them plenty of time to throw the ball, they're going to tear you apart. And that's exactly what they're doing when they're not blitzing anybody. If you send 3 people over and over and over and over and over, you're giving the quarterback 5+ seconds to throw the ball, and he's going to find someone. And it showed last night. So the main issue is I still think that the defense is, and I do think it is the defense's fault in that. Now, the offense, it doesn't help that these teams are getting out to bigger leads. That, in the Kansas City game, Kansas City jumped out to a 21-0 lead. Baltimore last night, 14-0. But here's the kicker. They're coming back. They're getting back to those scores. Now, in the second half, they got to get better executing on offense. That's a given. But it's kind of hard when you have a little bit of a stumble in the second half and the other team scoring 14 to 20 points in the meantime. It's just not ideal. And a team with the capability and the expectations or hopes of the Steelers, that just doesn't help. It's not a good thing for them, especially something that's been their identity for so long. So, getting on to one of our favorite things to do here on the show is our weekly NFL predictions. We love to do these every week, and starting off with a Thursday night football. It's the Indianapolis Colts taking on the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Patriots with a huge win over Miami at home, which I kind of expected. Miami going to Foxborough. It seems like each team going to the other stadium has had their issues. So New England getting a big win there, and I think they continue winning, beating the Colts on this Thursday night. Indianapolis not off to a great start, 1-3, worse than a lot of people thought they may be getting to, but New England is going to continue that. I know their defense struggles at times, but I've always said New England at home is one of the best teams you'll ever play. So give me the Patriots in Foxborough.
As much as I don't want to say New England, Josh Gordon got back in the game yesterday, had 32 yards and 2 catches, and their offense just played up to what it can. And their defense actually looked capable. They looked like an NFL defense this week. So as much as I like Andrew Luck and the Colts and how much more improved the Colts defense has been, I've got to go with New England.
The Atlanta Falcons traveling to Heinz Field and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, at the beginning of the season, they were searching for their 100th win at Heinz Field. They still have not got it in 2 home games so far. Both games they could have won, they were right there, but whether it was an offensive standpoint or a defensive possession that really killed it. I mean, Baltimore last night held the ball for over 5 minutes in a clutch situation. They were up 2 possessions. Great execution by the offense, but horrible drive by the defense. Atlanta having some similar issues, though. Atlanta having the problems of their defense is rough right now. They had a heartbreaking loss to Cincinnati yesterday. A big touchdown pass from Andy Dalton to A.J. Green with, I believe it was 4 seconds left in the game. So Atlanta suffering their heartbreaks. Both teams only winning one game. Pittsburgh with the better record right now because of the tie. And I don't know. This game is just so hard for me to pick because Pittsburgh, their defenses are both not looking good. And I want to say I'm going to go ahead and pick Pittsburgh. Only reason is because of the defense or because of the home field advantage. In that Atlanta's finally putting their offense together. Calvin Ridley, just a monster yesterday. 2 touchdown catches against the Bengals. Julio still a receiver. It seems like you're going to double cover every single time you come up to the line of scrimmage, but with the home field advantage and a full week of rest for Pittsburgh, because remember it was a short week this week. I'm going to say Steelers, and that may be a bias pick. Like I said, the Steelers just because of home field advantage.
I'm going Atlanta. Just because, I mean, if you look at, I like how you mentioned the weapons that Atlanta has. And their defense, it could be a shootout because both defenses are struggling really badly right now, which is totally possible. But if you look offensively, when it comes to the weapons they have, I think Atlanta has the upper hand because you have Calvin Ridley, who's had, I think, 2 130-yard games and a 3-touchdown game, a 2-touchdown game, I think another game of 1 or 2 touchdowns. And so he's obviously getting into the end zone. Julio Jones, through 4 games, is on pace for 120 receptions and 2,000 yards. He has 500 yards already, and he's fallen under the radar because he hasn't gotten any scores, but they're giving the ball to Ridley when they get in the red zone. It's so dynamic. Mohamed Sanu's still there. Tevin Coleman's there. Devontae Freeman, like we said last week, could come back at any moment. I think when it comes to offensively, the Steelers might have more chemistry together, and I really think that could be a possibility, but just more time with Matt Ryan being with Ridley and the possibility of Freeman coming back, even though Coleman's been playing well. It's just insane, just the amount of air, the power through the air that the Falcons have. And like you said, Pittsburgh's been struggling getting to the quarterback.
The Tennessee Titans taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, an AFC South versus AFC East team. Titans are surprisingly 3-1, and when I say, I mean I am really surprised that they are 3-1. In that Mariota's been hurt part of the year. At one point, he literally said he was playing in a game and he didn't have feeling in his hands. He didn't know if he still had the ball in his hands when he threw it. So, Titans traveling to Buffalo. Buffalo looks bad other than the one monster game they had against Minnesota out of nowhere in Minneapolis. But with that being said, I still think the Buffalo Bills still look bad in that Corey Davis is finally looking like the first-round receiver that Tennessee picked a couple years ago. And I think Tennessee wins this game pretty handily in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned Corey Davis because he actually got his first touchdown last week. I think he's going to start getting hungry for that. Marcus Mariota's numbers don't look great, but he's been hurt for 2 of the 4 games, and he put up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns without having. Still, I think he's got feeling back, obviously, in his arm, have those stats, but 1 week removed. So I'll go Tennessee.
Miami traveling to Cincinnati, both 3-1 teams, both surprising to me in that I knew Cincinnati was going to be decent. I didn't expect them to be top of the division 3-1 right now, though. I really thought that they were going to drop that game against Atlanta last week, and I really thought that they would. I thought actually this was going to be a team that maybe made a late season surge in that they were going to stumble at first, but they were going to still hang around enough to be in the talks towards the end. Cincinnati obviously blowing that out of the water for me, 3-1, and they've really looked very, very good and capable in each game so far. AJ Green still a monster to me, and I think they continue that in Cincinnati against a Dolphins team who just came off a huge loss to New England. I like Cincinnati, and Cincinnati coming off of that late game win against Atlanta in Atlanta. Give me the Bengals in this game against the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'm going Bengals as well. Just because something that you kind of hit on, AJ Green's a monster, right? Their leading receiver is Taj Boyd. Their leading running back is Joe Mixon, who's coming back this week. And yeah, they're missing Tyler Eifert, but that's aside the point. They have John Ross and AJ Green. They're kind of flying under the radar. Taj Boyd stepping up. Mixon's coming back. Miami's defense is not great. I like them, but they're not great. So I'm going Cincinnati.
Baltimore traveling to Cleveland, to Believeland. Call it a milestone here on Hot Takes with Holmes, but for the first time, I'm picking Cleveland in a football game. I like Cleveland in this game at home. They just came off of a heartbreaking loss against Oakland. Oakland is not the best team this year. We all know that by now. But keep in mind, that's a game they had to go across the country to play against. That's never easy for anyone to do. And they were a couple plays away from winning that game. Baltimore's coming off of a win against Pittsburgh on Sunday night. They're riding high right now. I think that could be an advantage for them, but I also think it could be a disadvantage for them because they're going to come into this game and they're going to think, well, we run the division right now with Cincinnati, and Cleveland's going to shock them. I really believe that they come into Cleveland. Baker has a pretty good game, but I believe it's the ground game that Carlos Hyde gets involved and leads this team to win. And plus, Baltimore seemed to stumble at times with Pittsburgh last week, who couldn't get to the quarterback, and they're coming up against Cleveland's defense. Give me the Browns and Cleveland this week.
I like John Brown, and if I did pick the Ravens because he's been on a roll, which is biased. He played for the Cardinals last year, but I've got to go with the Browns. I picked them 3 straight weeks. They got a win one of those for the first time in 2 years. Baker was 2 points away from winning, and it was a late game fumble. With more experience, he's just going to get better. I'm going Cleveland. I do think Carlos Hyde plays really well, and if he doesn't put up great numbers, he's going to tire out the defense.
Green Bay traveling to Detroit. The Lions looked great. Similar story to Buffalo in that they look better than Buffalo. They blew out the Patriots in Detroit on a Monday night. They played and then they've lost the rest of the games, and they go up against a Green Bay team who's 2-1-1. I don't see. This is a toss-up game for me because it's division. Division games are so hard to pick in that records don't really matter. Essentially, it all comes down to who just plays better on any given night. And with that in mind, give me the Packers in Detroit because we all know what happens when the Packers get late in Detroit. Rodgers just throws it up and they're going to convert on a Hail Mary. It's a joke, of course, but I like Green Bay in this game. I think Rodgers plays well enough to get them a win against Detroit's defense.
Kerryon Johnson has been the first Lions running back you mentioned last week that has rushed for over 100 yards in a game. But what's going to be the deciding factor in this game is the scariest 3 words in all of football, and it'll also tell you who my winner is. It's 4 words. Aaron Rodgers is healthy. So Green Bay's got it.
The Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. Kansas City still has to play tonight on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos, but against Jacksonville here, Jacksonville's defense is great. It's going to be the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has faced yet. There's no secrets with that, especially secondary-wise. And I want to say, with as much as Kansas City throws the ball, and the way they just rely on the passing game, I like Jacksonville in this game because unless Kareem Hunt finally puts, and Jacksonville is very vulnerable through the run. The run defense is not as good as it's made out to be. The secondary is just fantastic. So if Kansas City can accustom and can really go to more of and rely on the ground game, I like Kansas City, and they continue they gash them on first down to the point where they have to start committing to the run. However, Jacksonville's defense at times, I swear, it seems like they can put up 3 points in a game and they'll still win the game, and it's because their defense is just so fantastic. The secondary, they have probably at least 2 of the top 10, maybe 5 corners in the league on different sides of the field. That's what's insane to me. Boye and Ramsey are just an incredible secondary tandem. So give me Jacksonville, but just because of the secondary edge.
I'm going Kansas City here. Just because 2 of their biggest assets are tight end and a slot receiver. Neither one will I doubt either one will be matched up on Ramsey and Boye. And on top of that, Leonard Fournette's out questionable for Jacksonville, and I think we'll see the best Mahomes that we've seen all year. Just because, like you said, they're vulnerable to the run. Jacksonville's defense is. Kareem Hunt is going to explode onto the scene this game. It's going to open up play action. They're going to commit to the run. And Mahomes, his stats may not be as attractive as they have been, but it might be the smartest, most efficient play we've seen from him so far this year.
Denver traveling to East Rutherford to take on the Jets. Jets, I said the Lions are a lot like the Bills. I think the Jets are the epitome of what the Bills look like. But both teams just look not good in their first 4 games, other than one. The Jets blew out the Lions at home, ironically, or blew them out in Detroit. Then Buffalo blew out the Vikings in Minnesota. So, in this game, though, I think that Denver is going to be coming off of a loss tonight against Kansas City. And I like the Broncos in this game. I think that Case Keenum does enough to get, and Philip Lindsay, guy no one expected to be this good, comes out and really leads the Broncos to a win over the struggling Jets right now. I don't think Darnold can do enough, especially against us. I know he's struggled at times, but Chris Harris Jr. is still a very capable cornerback. Von Miller is still lurking around in the linebacking crew, and Denver's defense is still pretty capable. And with that, I like them against the Jets this week.
Again, I'm going to pick against you. I love Philip Lindsay. Great story. I like the receiving core. I like Case Keenum and Chris Harris. Von Miller drafted another edge rusher this year that I'm blanking on his name. But I've got to say the Jets, I think it's going to be similar to Jacksonville. The Jets are going to just violate their rush defense. They're going to take advantage of that. They have Isaiah Crowell, Bilal Powell. They've been getting receivers involved in the running game. I don't know if Darnold will have to do much. So I'm going with the Jets by a very slim margin.
New York Giants coming to Charlotte to take on the Panthers. The Giants should have been better than they are at this point. They have Odell Beckham back healthy. Evan Ingram still probably in my opinion, this early, still probably a top 5 tight end in the leagues right now, maybe top 10. And they have Saquon Barkley. They have a running game going. But Carolina looks pretty good right now. And coming off of a bye week against the New York Giants at home, I like Carolina pretty handily in this game at home.
I just want to point out that Cam Newton, statistically, from a yard standpoint, does not look that good. But his touchdown to interception ratio is 5-1. McCaffrey stepping up. The defense hasn't been playing terrible. And they signed the playmaker, the former All-Pro candidate in Eric Reed, who's going to be absolutely hungry. And I think Reed's going to wreak havoc on the Giants. And Cam Newton and McCaffrey are going to continue to exploit weak defenses. And I don't even think it's going to be close, honestly. Carolina by a landslide.
Oakland going to L.A. to take on the Chargers. The Raiders got their first win last week against the Cleveland Browns. Here's the thing that I think that makes that game a little bit of a fluke, though. It was a hard-fought game, and it was a good execution on a game by the Browns. Or, by the Raiders against the Browns. But Cleveland had to go all the way across the country. That, I don't care who you are, that does something to you. The Raiders have home field advantage there, and really, like I said, the Browns have looked impressive, a lot more impressive than they have last year, but they still have looked sometimes less than impressive. The Chargers are definitely an underachieving team. They're still very capable of winning a game pretty big. At home, I like the Chargers in this game. Phillip Rivers has a field day against Oakland's defense. Melvin Gordon gets involved on the ground, and the Chargers have just such a great have a very underrated receiving core, in my opinion. And I think this is Keenan Allen's coming out party in this game. Chargers win by over a touchdown.
Yeah, I've also gone with the Chargers here. I'd say by about a touchdown, just because the Raiders' defense has been lacking. I think their offense is finally starting to click, but their defense has been lacking. And Joey Bosa is going to be back into a rhythm more so, I believe. So I'm going Chargers as well.
Minnesota Vikings going to Philadelphia to take on the defending Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. I'm sure Eagles fans will never get tired of hearing that. Minnesota coming off of a loss, a loss last week. Same thing with Philadelphia. Philadelphia coming off of a loss. Vikings lost big, I shouldn't say lost big, lost in a big game against the Los Angeles Rams. And both Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins went off in that game. With Philadelphia coming out, they lost to the Tennessee Titans in overtime. I know this is pretty much the exact opposite of what happened last year this is a rematch of what happened in the playoffs last year. In fact, same situation. Minnesota going to Philadelphia. Philadelphia won big. I understand that. But I don't know. I like Minnesota in this game purely for one reason. Minnesota's had a very long week. They've been very prepared. Going from Thursday to Sunday. Philadelphia's coming off of an overtime loss on a Sunday. Even with the home field advantage, give me Minnesota.
I'm going to say give me Philadelphia. Because I believe their secondary has been putrid so far. But Rasul Douglas, a guy that as a rookie last year had 3 picks as a reserve, he's expected to get more playing time with Jalen Mills' struggles, which could bring another dynamic, more coverage skills, better coverage skills to the defense. So I don't think that there's really much to worry about on the Eagles then. Carson Wentz another week back. The offense looked good, aside from the offensive line. I think that Philly's going to look better. So I'm going with them.
Arizona going to Santa Clara to take on the San Francisco 49ers. Both teams right now struggling. The 49ers lost their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. I believe was it an Achilles or an ACL that put him on the injured reserve for the rest of the season. And really that was San Francisco's driving force in that they still have some playmakers, but I don't know. I don't believe that a CJ Beathard led team is going to have the same impact that a Jimmy Garoppolo led team is going to have. With that being said, Arizona has struggled. They've been involved in some of the games so far, and they really have been just a play away, especially last week. But I like the Niners at home this week, and it's at home. George Kittle looks very impressive as a tight end right now for San Francisco, and give me the Niners at home against Arizona, and a game that could be a toss-up either way.
Yeah, this will be the first time going back to last year that I've actually picked Arizona. But I'm going to go with them just because Rosen getting back into a groove. The defense didn't look absolutely terrible. Special teams has been a struggle. But I think Rosen with another week under his belt with Fitz and the offensive line looking a little more improved and playing against C.J. Beathard, a guy the defense has experience against. I'm going Arizona with this one.
The Rams taking on the Seahawks. I've said it before and I'll say it again. On paper, I think that the Los Angeles Rams are probably the best team in the the NFC. Jared Goff is looking as confident as ever in his third year. The receiving tandem of Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. You have a running back like Todd Gurley, who in my opinion is the best running back in the NFL right now. And their defense, Aaron Donald, Akeem Talib, Marcus Peters. I could go on about this team and how great they look. And I like them again on the road to Seattle. I know Seattle is a very good team at home. I think the Rams will win this game pretty handily, especially coming off of a long week. Jared Goff lit up the Vikings defense, another defense that I thought was going to be a lot better than they are this year. And on that depleted Seahawks secondary, now missing Earl Thomas, it could be a long day for the Seahawks defense trying to stop Jared Goff in that high-powered offense. Give me the Rams.
Yeah, give me the Rams as well because Cooper Kupp was a monster. And you just see all the different playmakers they have. Again, you have Pharaoh Cooper, an all-pro returner, Kupp, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods. Jared Goff looked elite against Minnesota at least. Plus Todd Gurley, an MVP candidate. And their defense is loaded at every position. Akeem Talib's on IR, but they're still loaded without him. So I'm going the Rams by a landslide.
Dallas really not playing much of an away game this week, going to Houston to take on the Texans. Texans got their first win last week against the Indianapolis Colts in overtime. And with it being a Sunday night game, this is obviously going to be prime time. Both teams have struggled at times, but Deshaun Watson looked pretty good last game. He really did. Now, here's my deciding factor. I like the Cowboys in this game. Cowboys got a big win at home last week, and Zeke got involved from the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, Deshaun Watson looks that good, and Dallas' defense isn't that much better, but it was against Indianapolis' defense. It was on the road, but I like the Cowboys, and this is a very toss-up game, too. I think this could be anybody. You flip a coin, and whatever it landed on, you could pick that. I'd still just feel just as confident. And with this game being as close, I like the Cowboys barely in this edge this week.
I like the Texans just because of the versatility of the offense. You don't have to rely just on Dak's legs and Zeke, but you have Watson who can improvise as well. You have Lamar Miller, who's not as talented as Zeke, but can still get the job done. You have receivers like Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. There's just so much versatility and so many weapons of the offense. And again, both defenses have been struggling. And Houston has more potential with the defense if they click as well. So that would be why I'd have to choose Houston for that one.
Finally, on Monday night, the Washington Redskins taking on the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome. I almost don't feel like I need to say this because I think that New Orleans has been one of the better home teams in a long time, like in the past while. Since the Superdome is always a terrifying place to go to if you're a team. Also, here's the thing: the Washington Redskins take on the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara has been on fire, has been unstoppable, and they get Mark Ingram back this week. Keep in mind, so that's going to be the backfield of Kamara and an Ingram who's very upset, who's very angry, coming off of a suspension, and Drew Brees is going to have a lot of fun with his Redskins defense because I think New Orleans wins this game by over 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. There might be some slack in the Rams' defense, which could cause it to be a competitive game. But I also think that, for one, Alex Smith is too conservative to come back from a large deficit. We saw that in Kansas City in playoffs. But two, with Ingram coming back, I forgot about that. Mike Thomas has been on a roll. Drew Brees has been a monster, as well as Kamara. Kamara's been unique and just superior to pretty much every opponent that he's played against this year to this point. So I got to go with New Orleans as well.
Well, that's going to do it for the predictions this week of the NFL, but we're going to move on to another topic that's just as interesting at times, and it's going to be college football, NCAA football. Last week, week 5, we saw some very good games. Best one, probably one of the better ones coming out from Clemson. Syracuse. Clemson escaped with a 27-23 win. However, it felt like a loss because their new starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, came out with a huge injury. And as it was known, Kelly Bryant left the team. He decided he was going to transfer. And, of course, the way the world works, as soon as he leaves, they come back, and Trevor Lawrence does get hurt in this game against Syracuse. Nevertheless, Clemson came out of this game with a 27-23 win. It hurts Clemson to lose a freshman, your starting quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, but it's good to be resilient and be able to get out of that loss. And Syracuse was undefeated at this point, so it's not like they lost to a fluke team by any means. But probably the biggest game of the weekend was Ohio State and Penn State. This was a game that was insane. It was a 4v9, and it really played like that. I mean, Ohio State, Penn State, it was shot after shot, back and forth. And Ohio State came up and scored with about 2 minutes to go. Penn State, without timeouts, was driving down the field on a 4th and 5. Had one of the most head-scratching play calls I've ever seen. On a 4th and 5, instead of putting the ball in the air with Trace McSorley and trying to make something happen, they elected to run a halfback sweep out of the shotgun that got blown up and stopped for about a loss of 4 on 4th and 5. And because of that, all they needed was a field goal. If you throw it in the air and you convert there, that's just huge. You don't have to score a touchdown here. I understand your idea. You want to potentially catch them off guard, but I don't understand the play call. With that, of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes did beat the Penn State Nittany Lions to 27-26 in a game that had college football playoff implications possibly, because I don't know of another team in the Big Ten that's going to stop Ohio State this year. Another big game was Notre Dame and Stanford, a game I thought was going to be close, but Stanford just looked not great. Notre Dame just looks fantastic. Won 38-17 at home against the Cardinal. And here's the kicker. Here's the reason why I mentioned that game. Guess who Virginia Tech has next week in Lane Stadium? That would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That will be a very tough matchup. It'll be the hardest game that Tech has had to face all year long at this point. And Tech came off of a win as well. A big win against Duke this week, 131-14 on Duke's home field. Now, as I said, Notre Dame's going to be your toughest. It's probably going to be your toughest game all season long, to be completely honest. And if they can, I do believe that I'm on the firm. I firmly believe that if Tech can get past the Fighting Irish, they have a chance to run the rest of the table, because Boston College looks okay. Georgia Tech is always scary on a Thursday night this year. It's going to be the triple option that they always run. Here's the kicker with Georgia Tech. Virginia Tech gets a bye week to prepare for it. So they get 2 weeks compared to most teams only getting one, preparing for a purely triple option. I think that obviously works in their favor. The toughest game that Virginia Tech has for the rest of this year might be UVA, though, because UVA looks pretty good right now as well. Another big game last week, Georgia. Georgia looked tough. The final score against the Volunteers was 38-12. The game was a lot closer than that score wants to show, though. It was at one point, I believe it was like 26-12, and Georgia was stumbling, but off of a great late game drive to run out a lot of clock really killed Tennessee's chances. But I think this shows a tale of two teams, in that Georgia has struggled. They definitely have their kryptonite right now, but there's nothing they learned. The dual quarterback system of Fromm and Justin Fields is terrifying, because you throw in, it's the epitome of a 2-quarterback system. You throw in Jake Fromm, who's probably the better passer, and then at times, if you think that they're getting used to the run by Elijah Holyfield and the passing game, you throw in Justin Fields, and you don't know what they're going to do at this point. Justin Fields still has a very capable arm, and he's fast. He's a mobile quarterback. And Georgia showed that late game, again, against Tennessee. Tennessee's not that great of a team, but it was still a pretty impressive late game clutch situation execution by the Bulldogs. And I think this says things for Tennessee too. The fact that came off an embarrassing loss against Florida on their home field the week before. They go up against the number 2 team in the nation, and they hung in there for the longest time until the very end. Again, the score doesn't necessarily dictate how close the game was, in my opinion. And I think both teams take good things from this. I'm also saying the same thing for West Virginia. West Virginia almost gave up a huge second half lead. Really, it was almost a fantastic comeback by Texas Tech, who seems to be West Virginia's kryptonite over the years. But Will Grier still looks great, and the Mountaineers are showing resiliency and winning in late game situations. Here's what I say. I said it last week. Whoever wins the Big 12 between West Virginia and Oklahoma, they're going to the college football playoff. I firmly, even if you only have one loss, I firmly believe that. And that the other conferences don't have teams, in my opinion, that you can stack up against them and say, well, they are clearly better and they deserve the college football playoff. I don't see it. And so that's a huge game for West Virginia. And I think both teams have the capability to run the table, except for when they play each other. They might have to play each other twice this year. So what do you take away from Week 5 of college football, and who is your team to beat in the nation right now?
The takeaways you pretty much covered, but my team to beat would have to still be Alabama. Tua Tagovailoa has just been insane. Jalen Hurts' his humility to come back and play as an understudy. You know, he still gets some playing time, but either in garbage time or situations where they're already up by 3 scores early in the game. He's a Swiss Army knife, too. You can use him for anything, but just their defense is living up to the hype like they do every year. Tua has exceeded the hype. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's being overhyped. He's not as talented as we made him out to be after one half of football in the championship game. But he's to me, he's surpassed the expectations. Doesn't turn the ball over. A supreme arm talent, and the humility of Hurts just makes the team that much more dangerous.
Here's what I want to say, too. I saw a bold prediction the other day, and when I really started to think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Everyone's saying, well, Jalen Hurts should transfer so he can play. Keep in mind this. He played this year. What the bold prediction said was he was going to redshirt next year So that way, when Tua Tagovailoa goes to the NFL draft, he's there and he's going to play lead the Alabama offense as a fifth-year senior. That's still a very capable possibility. And as my co-host Isaiah Addair does go off to class, I'll be here for another 10 minutes or so to continue discussing college football, the college football playoff and college football. Tua Tagovailoa is still a very capable quarterback, and I think he has the potential next year to be probably the number one pick in the NFL draft. If Jalen Hurts can stick around and really be a playmaker this year, he can redshirt next year, be the leader of the Alabama offense as a fifth-year senior, and if they make some noise in that fifth year, that helps his draft stock a lot more in that he was able to work with what he had compared to going somewhere else to do it. Now, if he does decide to transfer, it's not a bad decision, but I definitely think that if Hurts could still make something out of this situation, by all means. So the Alabama Crimson Tide this week, going into the weekly predictions, Alabama takes on Arkansas at Arkansas. About 3 to 4 years ago, I might have said this game is going to be closer, but Alabama wins this game handily. Arkansas does not look good right now, and I like the Crimson Tide in this game. Kansas going to Morgantown to take on West Virginia. Kansas has won 2 games in a football season. I don't know the last time I could say that so confidently. They're going to continually winning 2 games this season. They're not upsetting West Virginia in Morgantown. Will Grier wins this game very big. The Red River rivalry. Texas, number 19, taking on Oklahoma, number 7. Texas having their best season they've had in a long time. But Oklahoma just looks great right now. Kyler Murray throwing for 7 touchdown passes against Baylor last week. And Marquise Brown from Oklahoma looking very good as a receiver. Give me the Sooners taking out the Longhorns, especially being at home in Austin. Maryland traveling to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan, the Wolverines. Wolverines I don't know how to feel about them because we've been told they're going to be so good for the past 5 years, 3 to 4 or 5 years, and they just haven't. There haven't been a good that they've had their season when they were college football playoff contenders, then they dropped 2 straight games, and just it hasn't been that great. They're off to a 4-1 start, and Shea Patterson still looks like a capable quarterback at times. And I think they get this win against Maryland, who's 3-1. But I don't think Michigan's going to be... I don't like the ceiling of Michigan right now. Northwestern taking on Michigan State. Michigan State wins this game in East Lansing. Now, it is worth noting that Northwestern came close to beating Michigan last week. But I do like Michigan State in this game at home. So give me the Spartans. Georgia Tech taking on Louisville, both struggling ACC teams, but with the home field, even with the triple option, I like Louisville in this game. Give me the Cardinals. Let's see here. Missouri taking on South Carolina. This is a team. These are 2 teams that Mizzou has actually looked better than people want to give them credit. Their only losses to Georgia so far, and here's the thing that's so defining about Missouri. They throw the ball a metric ton. Drew Lock is a very great, underrated quarterback, but they put the ball up so much, especially for an for an SEC team. So South Carolina looks rough right now, and it's going to be in Columbia with Williams-Brice Stadium, and South Carolina has the home field. But South Carolina looks rough right now, and I think this is going to be the game that Will Muschamp has to consider sitting Jake Bentley, a guy that looked very like he could lead South Carolina to a pretty good record a couple years ago. He may have to sit him this year because he has not looked great, and I like the Tigers in this game against the Gamecocks. Syracuse coming off of their 1 loss of the season to Clemson against Pittsburgh. It doesn't get easier going to Pittsburgh. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't get easier. It definitely gets easier, but Clemson, they just lost to Clemson, who lost their starting quarterback, and they're going up against this Pittsburgh Panthers team, a team that's always are good for 1 upset a year. I don't know if this necessarily classifies as an upset, though, because Syracuse is still it's still iffy at times, but I like the orange in this game against the Panthers. Boston College falling out of the rankings last week a couple weeks ago as they lost to Purdue. They are 4-1 though in and they are 4-1 and 1-0 in the ACC, taking on NC State, who's also 4-0 and 1-0 in the ACC. I like Boston College. I think they're a very good football team, an underrated football team, but give me NC State in Raleigh this weekend. Clemson taking on Wake Forest. Wake Forest, they were close at one point. I said they were going to beat I said they could beat Notre Dame. They were close at one point when the game started 0-0, and other than that, that's pretty much it. Wake Forest at home, though, I like and Clemson, who knows, with the starting quarter, with Trevor Lawrence out and Kelly Bryant obviously transferring, who knows who's really going to be the main playmaker. Travis Etienne of Clemson looks very good right now. I got to take the Tigers in this game, but I don't necessarily know how it's going to be without their quarterback. One of the bigger SEC games of the week at 3:30, the CBS game, LSU and Florida, a rivalry that takes place every single year. Florida 4-1, 2-1 at home in Gainesville against the 5-0 Tigers, who are number 5 in the nation right now. And this is a game that's so hard to pick because records don't really matter, in that LSU and Florida is always one that you're going to expect a very heavy, really it's a very heavy ground game. But this time for Florida, and LSU looks like they have a quarterback right now. Florida, Felipe Franks, they do throw the ball a good bit. That being said, the volunteer fan in me, and plus I think this is a very capable game for LSU. I don't think Florida is as good as their record does say. I don't think they have any real true statement wins. Tennessee does not look that good this year. And really, I don't think they have a true, that huge statement win. So with that being said, give me the Tigers in Gainesville. Florida State traveling to Miami to take on the Hurricanes. Give me the Hurricanes this game. 4-1 right now. Florida State does not look good in the ACC. I like the Hurricanes. Iowa State going up against Oklahoma State. Iowa State, a team I thought was going to be better than 1-3 to this point, and I think they continue to struggle. They go 1-4 against Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Kansas State and Baylor, a Big 12 matchup. Both teams not really going to contend in the Big 12, but with that being said, I like Baylor with the home field advantage in Waco. Indiana going to Ohio State. Indiana's 4-1 right now in the Big 10, and they still are an under-the-radar, very underrated football team. Ohio State coming off of a huge win against Penn State in Happy Valley, though. Give me Ohio State to win this game big in Columbus. Arizona State going up against the 4-0 and undefeated Colorado Buffaloes. I like Colorado right now. I like Colorado in this game as well, and I think they continue their undefeated season right now against Arizona State. Kentucky going up against Texas A&M, another SEC matchup right now. I like Kentucky. Kentucky looks very good. Benny Snell Jr. is if he continues to run like he is, it seems like he's going to be a Heisman candidate. I like the Wildcats to win this game, even in Kyle Field and College Station. Vanderbilt and Georgia. Vanderbilt, they sometimes play Georgia tough, it seems like, but Georgia coming off of that close win, they're not going to let it be a doubt like it was last week, and they're going to win this game big in Athens against the Commodores. Auburn taking on Mississippi State. Auburn wins this game. Mississippi State still looks okay, but Auburn, other than that one loss earlier this year, they look pretty. Other than that one loss, I believe it was to Washington. No, it was off the top of my head. I believe it was LSU, and Auburn still looks very good. And I like Stidham in this game. I think that the Tigers win against the Bulldogs in Starkville. Washington and UCLA. Chip Kelly has the worst record of a UCLA quarterback, I believe, since like 1954. And Washington continues to make that worse. They win big, and they win pretty handily in Pasadena. Washington wins in this game. Nebraska and Wisconsin. Nebraska still searching for their first win underneath Scott Frost. Scott Frost did not inherit a good program. I think that's pretty easy to tell. And Wisconsin, their only loss this year to BYU. Give me the Badgers against the Cornhuskers this time. And last but certainly not least, Notre Dame going up against Virginia Tech. Here's my telltale sign. Notre Dame is a great football team. They've really looked fantastic so far this year. Virginia Tech's a very capable team. Their only loss is to, of course, the biggest loss in 40 years, Old Dominion. But I like Virginia Tech in Lane Stadium this week, and it's purely because of Lane Stadium. So if Virginia Tech wants a chance in this game, the fans better show up, and they will, and they're going to be loud. So Virginia Tech, with that home field advantage, has that chance. Now, Virginia Tech has lost their quarterback. Josh Jackson is not going to be playing in this game. But I like the Hokies in this game against the Fighting Irish. This is a game that could be very close. I think it's probably at the most a touchdown. But give me the Hokies in my upset alert for this week. Moving on to Major League Baseball. Really, it's going to the end of the season. I believe we're playing game 164 today. And I like in the playoff fields, really, the teams have been set, and that starting in the playoffs, these are the teams that will be playing. I know in the National League, you do have the teams of the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers were fighting it out, slugging it out in the NL Central. Both teams with clearly the best division. Clearly the best division in the NL, and it's really not even close. And I really think that whoever wins that division is going to be huge, and I think it is Chicago. So no, Chicago and Milwaukee are still fighting it out for the division right now, and nevertheless, though that division has not been decided. In the NL West, the Colorado Rockies and the Dodgers are still fighting for it, but the teams have been set. It's the Cubs, Brewers, Rockies, Dodgers, and Braves. No matter what, those are the teams that are going to be playing. The seeding still has to be set. So that division is going to be fun to watch. Let's go to the AL. And the AL has their sluggers on top with the Red Sox, the Indians, the Yankees, the Athletics, and the Houston Astros. These are just there's so many huge teams in the AL, and I do believe that whoever does make it out of the AL, I think there are several teams that are very capable of doing it. Whoever makes it out of the AL, if they lose in the World Series, in my opinion, it's going to be a surprise. Unless maybe if Cleveland got to the World Series, I'm not saying Cleveland's a bad team. I just don't think that they have the same firepower, or Oakland. They don't think they have the same firepower that some of the other teams do. I definitely think they're my World Series favorites right now, depending on where they are. I like the Red Sox coming out of the American League. And I honestly kind of like the Dodgers or the Cubs coming out of the National League. And that will be a game, that'll be a series that'll be very, very memorable and fun to watch. I think the Red Sox win it all this year, though. They have the postseason advantages. They have the pitching. They have the bats. They have really everything that you want to ask for in a baseball team right now. They're definitely the favorite for me to win the World Series. I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Los Angeles came in and with the pitching of Clayton Kershaw or even Chicago, it's going to be a fun postseason, to say the least. And, of course, the seeds are not set yet, and really the games will begin tomorrow. The postseason begins tomorrow. Whoever is the wild card teams, and it's weird because in the NL, neither wild card team is fully set. The only definite that we have right now is Atlanta is going to be in the NLDS. That's it. Chicago could be playing tomorrow, or Milwaukee could be playing tomorrow, and they could be going. And it's funny, whoever wins and whoever is the wild card has a home game against whoever loses against the Colorado Rockies and the Dodgers in the division. So that's what's interesting to me is no one has any idea where they're going or who they're playing, but the playoffs start tomorrow, and that's going to be something to look out for. Well, that's going to do it here on Hot Takes with Holmes here from Radio Free Radford. If you like what you heard today, then be sure to like our Facebook page, or all of our updates with the show and certain things go on to there. We also have a YouTube channel. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe on some of our videos, and of course for both Facebook and YouTube, we are Hot Takes with Holmes. Find us on both. We're also, if you like what you hear ever here on Radio Free Radford, I would hope so. I hope you tune in every single week. If that's the case, be sure to follow Radio Free Radford's social media pages. There's plenty of great shows that happen here throughout the week. And follow the social media pages. The Twitter is at Radio Free Raddy. Instagram is Radio Free Radford, all lowercase. Facebook, Radio Free Radford. Be sure to like and follow, subscribe to our social media pages. Let us know some feedback and if we can fix a few things. With that being said, my name is Blake Holmes, and for my co-host Isaiah Addair, we'll see you next week here on Radio Free Radford.